Good evening, thanks for coming tonight. My name's Dan Waddell. It's now my great pleasure to introduce to the stage our two protagonists this evening, Emma Jones and the one and only Hugh Grant.
Thank you everybody for coming. It's lovely to see you all, and thank you for Trinity for hosting this, because it's just such a lovely room and a fantastic place to be able to do this. Hugh, thank you for giving us your time tonight, because it's a busy time, isn't it, for you at the moment? I think we've just recently seen you giving some wonderful moving prose at the BAFTA ceremony, where you did a beautiful Oompa Loompa rendition which moved hearts and minds, and we were wondering really, I suppose, will you be doing the same thing at the Oscars? Have you got anything planned? Are you presenting an award?
What, did you see what happened last year?
Yes.
On the red carpet?
Can you explain?
I had a little catastrophe. I was presenting last year, and then, so you arrive, and I don't really like doing interviews, but my publicist said, no, you've got to do one, because if you don't do one, you don't get to go to the front of the limo queue. So I said, oh, I'll do one. And that perfectly nice girl asked me some questions, and I just wasn't in the mood. And I got nastier and nastier. And it became a thing. So oddly enough, I'm not invited this year. No.
So, sometimes it must be very difficult, because we're in this world now where everybody talks in a certain way, especially at these sorts of events. Everybody's gratified and it's wonderful.
Yeah, I know.
Sometimes it must be quite difficult.
I do think, I don't know how it happened, that our business became uniquely boring. If you went to a convention of double glazing salesmen or insurance salesmen, they'd have more jokes and people would be more interesting than a bunch of actors talking about it's an amazing space that I was blessed to have.
Beautiful.
That's
beautiful. Thank you. I think a round of applause for that. Yeah.
What's wrong with them? Yeah, I know what you mean.
So what do they actually like? Do you have to sit through the whole ceremony when you go to the BAFTAs or the Oscars or whatever? We want to know what it's like. I've never been to the Oscars. I want to know.
No, you have a seat filler. So you can leave any time you want and go to the bar. I go a lot. And as soon as you go, a man and a woman, or if you go with your wife, a man and a woman come sit down in your place all dressed up. But I didn't know that to start with, and it took me a few years to realise what was actually going on. And I realised that I'd been making conversation to these people for hours and thinking, oh, Christ, it's some nominee and it's a seat filler. But I think it's a good idea for a romantic comedy, the seat filler.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
See, and they connect, the seat filler and the nominee.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
Do they have to look like you and your wife, or can it just be anyone?
No, it can be Joe Bloggs.
Oh, that's excellent. So, what can we look forward to from you next? I believe you've got a couple of TV things coming out. Now, I know you had a bit of a grump, or a bit of a sense of TV not being the thing for you, but have you come round to the idea that TV acting is actually a good thing?
I do basically spit on TV. In my infinite grandeur. But I'm the last person who does that. No one else seems to mind about doing telly anymore. And I suppose streaming, if it's HBO, it's apparently quite classy. So yeah, I've got this HBO thing with Kate Winslet, and I'm in it a bit.
Who do you play?
I play kind of Tony Blair, really. She's a crazy sort of like Putin, a female Putin in an invented East European country, and she's become a despot, and she keeps the ex-chancellor, who was elected but a bit weak, in a cell under the castle, and that's me. And occasionally when she's in a bad mood, she sends people in to beat me to a jelly. So I start the film looking like this, and by the end, you can't see my face. I'm completely beaten up. So that's fun. And then, and then I did something with Jerry Seinfeld about Pop-Tarts.
Yes. So this is about the inventor of Pop-Tarts.
He's obsessed. For some reason, Jerry Seinfeld's obsessed with cereals. No one really knows why. It's always been part of his stand-up routine. And then he wrote this script about the invention of Pop-Tarts and the great war there was between the big cereal companies in whatever that part of America is. You know, between Kellogg's and another one, and it got very nasty. Anyway, it's sitting on my computer for me to watch, and I haven't dared yet. Because my agent, for the last 26 years, has raved about every single thing I've done, however shit. And in this one, she's dead silence. So something's amok.
Working with Kate Winslet, you worked with her years ago, didn't you? Has she changed?
Well, she's lovely.
Yeah, of course, of course.
She's great. Yeah, well, she was in Sense and Sensibility. It was our first ever job.
Was it?
And it was difficult for her. It was difficult for all of us because that was directed by Ang Lee from Taiwan. And this was the Jane Austen adaptation, and it was tricky for him because he didn't speak one word of English. Well, he had a few words, but they were not normal, lovely language to English actors. So I remember going out to...
After my first scene, I did a scene walking along across the lawn with Emma Thompson. And we said, "What do you think, Ang?" He was sitting there watching the little monitor. And he said, very boring. And it was hurtful. And he said to Kate Winslet at the end of the first week, he said, "You will get better." So she was all bummed out. But I'm quite fond of him.
Yes.
Family, we called him.
Last time I spoke with you, we were talking about the possibility of a Bridget Jones 4. Now, I read the Daily Mail because I love the Daily Mail. And Sarah Vine's column said that for accuracy, it's a wonderful
Who's here tonight, I believe.
It's a wonderful thing. Sarah Vine's column said that for accuracy's sake, Bridget Jones should be 55 and going through the menopause. And I just wondered what Daniel Cleaver's reaction to that would be and what his midlife crisis might look like, and would he be able to cope with hot flushes in a good way?
Oh, yeah. I know. Anything hot. It is... it is, of course, ludicrous. We're ancient. But I'll say this. I hate all scripts. But it's a very, very good script because this is Helen Fielding. She married a American screenwriter and had 2 children, and then he very sadly died, cancer. And she was left bringing up these 2 kids, and it was brutal. And she wrote a book, a novel that was not a Bridget Jones book about this, and then suddenly realized her main character sounded a bit like Bridget, so she made it a Bridget. And it's actually really funny and really moving. So it might be quite good, but it is true, we're very old, and in fact, I'm dead.
Yes, so let's go back a little bit. You did, before acting, have a very distinguished life ahead of you. You studied literature at New College, Oxford. You were a scholarship, is that right?
Oh, yes,
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy your degree? And how? A question I'd like to ask is, does understanding literature, does that kind of help you as an actor? Does it give you a different perspective as an actor?
No. No, I think that was a complete waste of 3 years. And I was a monster. I started quite nice. I was a grammar school boy from Hammersmith, and I hung out with the grammar school friends and had a quite nice first year. And then I got sort of drawn into the posh Bridesheady set, and I became an absolute arsehole. That's really what happened.
Are there photos of
All
this?
I cared about was which invitations were on my mantelpiece, you know. Yeah. Ghastly.
But before university, you were a bit ghastly as well, weren't you? Didn't you go to Italy? Didn't you go to Italy and sort of look at poetry and
Yes.
painting. Tell me about that. I want to hear that. And what was your hair like then?
It was gorgeous. There's no other word for it. If I could find another word, I would. It's always been gorgeous. Do you know, I went through a phase of going to Fulham matches when I was in my 30s. I was unemployed as an actor, and I was going to a lot of Fulham matches, not only at home, but I went to away matches on the train with all the Fulham lot, and they didn't know what to make of me. I sat at the other end of the carriage, and they used to get really drunk after the match, and they'd have songs about everyone in the train. And at one point, to my horror, I realized they were singing, "Who's the student with the hair?" And it was me. Shaming. Yeah, I had lovely hair, and I went to Italy at my, what they can now call a gap year. And, yes, took notes on art and little sketches. I mean, why? What's wrong with me?
But you put yourself down because you have got a very artistic streak, haven't you, I think, really?
Well, I've got a very pretentious streak.
Yes,
Yeah, no.
okay, put it that way.
Yeah. My house is full of really pretentious contemporary art that I bought just to look cool, really. And no one likes it.
So does that mean you're probably, the character you're most like is the one in About a Boy, who is there's a lot of you in that, but there's also a lot of Tree in the Wind, which...
Tree and Wind.
Tree and Wind, which was one, I think that was your first part, wasn't it?
Yeah, my first part was Tree and Wind at Nottingham Playhouse.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I was rather good. Yeah. What was the question?
It's the question that you get asked a lot, I suppose. Of all your characters, which one would you say is the most like yourself, or does that change with time?
I'd like to open that up to my friends on the floor.
Paddington 2.
Paddington 2 is correct, yeah. Yeah.
The narcissistic streak.
Yes. Terrible, broken old love you. Yeah, that's it. The Oompa Loompa.
Yes, I was going to say you've recently been offered the part of an orangutan, and I was just worrying that you previously in your career you were typecast as a sort of beautiful romantic lead, handsome English gent. Now you seem to be typecast as an orange thing. Have the Gingers Actors Union been in touch? Because you're not a natural redhead.
No, they'll be
and
furious.
I speak as one.
Yes, they will be furious. Your daughter will be furious.
Well, you do, yes.
I don't like making jokes about it. I'm frightened of it.
Will you be playing the orangutan?
Oh, I don't know. I think he's gone mad. This is Steven Soderbergh. He's a great, distinguished director. And I heard he's going to offer you a part. I was rather excited. And then it's an orangutan. But every part in the film is a monkey. It's in a world where the monkeys have taken over and are running Hollywood. And so it's orangutans, chimpanzees, macaques, all running Hollywood. I might do it, but it's possible now. I said, what are you going to do? We're all wearing masks, and apparently it's all possible with AI. It's just us acting, and then the monkey face goes on in post.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Do you think that there will be an AI version of you?
I think there is already, and it's much better than me too. It was in Paddington.
Yes, it was good.
Yeah.
But if there is, have other actors got in there before you, and have people patented their AI version of themselves, or is that something you need to think about?
I don't know. I don't understand AI, but I think that's what the whole actors' strike was about.
Oh, yes.
Wasn't it?
Yes, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, because now I could die tonight.
Yes, that's right.
And they could go on making films.
Exactly.
Then my children wouldn't get the money.
It's interesting when you look back at something like Four Weddings and a Funeral, which, although it looks very glamorous, it was actually a low-budget film, really.
$5 million.
Wow.
Yeah. And it made $350 million worldwide. But unfortunately, in terms of profit share for the actors, it never made a profit. Who knew? They said, yeah, there was a lot of expenses.
If you think about those early days, and you've gone back generations and generations and generations in terms of acting, how do you compare that now with the sort of parts that you play and the sort of the film set experience that you have, because I suppose, you know, in the last two movies, it's been a lot of
CGI.
CGI, yeah, where you've been, it was Paddington, you were talking to a stick, I believe, and
yeah.
But then it was probably a completely different experience, I guess, and like a legendary cast, and you're mingling, and has something been lost?
Well, as I said, that all went wrong. I said on some chat show in America, it was quite nice in the old days because no one had a mobile phone, and you talked to the crew. Imagine that now. I wouldn't talk to the crew, for God's sake. But you did. Everyone talked to each other, and then they had affairs, and it was all fine. You was flirting. It was fun. You went on location. It was really fun. But now all that's gone. Not that I am looking for it now. I'm very, very happily married to a lovely woman, as you know. But I think it is boring for people. It's much more boring, and everyone's sort of obsessed with themselves, and all the actors just go back and get on Instagram. But back in the 80s, filming was terrifying because the director didn't have a little TV monitor to watch through. He loomed right next to the camera and was there watching away and making a sad face. So in some ways it's better now.
Who is the most fearsome?
Ken Russell. Ken Russell, who made all those famous 60s horror films. And I caught him at the end of his career when he was great, but very, 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 he had a very, very big lunch, very liquid lunch. And I mean, maybe 3 bottles of wine. And then in the afternoon, he'd come back on the set with a very red face. And I remember I was trying to do a shot where I had to pick up a big sword, swing it round my head and cut a monster in half, as you do. And I said, I don't know, something about the shot doesn't feel right. And he said, well, fuck how it fucking feels. Do you know how I fucking showed you, you cunt? And that's not the classic way to talk to actors.
That couldn't happen now.
No, it wouldn't happen now, no.
No. What about the best actress that you've worked with? I think I know what you might say, but...
Well, the one I loved most was Bullock.
Uh-huh.
Is that the one you thought I was going to say?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Sandy Bullock.
Because you were in... Which film were you in?
It was called 2 Weeks' Notice. Did I do another one with it? No, I did that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's really... she's a great girl. She'd be very good doing this Q&A, and I don't know what else to say about her, really. Mad. German, surprisingly. She's brought up in Germany, yeah, speaks fluent German. Yeah, and has about 400 dogs. Too many dogs.
Your wife's Swedish, she's formidable, she's a writer, she's beautiful, she's...
She turned up yet?
Did she...
You here, Anna?
She's on her way.
She's with her other young man.
Yeah. What did the Swedish think of you? What do you think of Sweden and Swedish culture?
I'm mad about the Swedes. They're so nice to me. You can't... No one will hurt you in Sweden. They've got the shittest tabloid press. They'll come up and say, can we take a photo? And you go, no, not right now. Okay, fine. And then they run away. And they've got one tabloid, I can't remember what it's called, Aftonblatt or something, and it's just always glowing about me. So I love Sweden. We got a house there, and it's very, very safe, and everyone drives at 5 miles an hour. And I like the Swedes.
So tabloid culture is very different. I was going to ask you a little bit about, you know, your other side, your campaigning side. How did you get... You know, no, let's start with this. So initially, you suddenly shoot to fame on the back of 4 Weddings, a Funeral. And fame's a strange thing. In fact, perhaps an unnatural thing. What was it like? And how did the tabloids treat you to begin with? And did you go along with it then?
It was a tiny 5-minute honeymoon when that film was a success. And yeah, they were, you know... They were quite nice about me. And then the worm turned. And it was savage. It was savage. But I think it was partly my fault because I played up to that. You know, that character was written by Richard Curtis, and I thought, well, if that's what it takes to have a big hit and for people to love you all over America, I'll just be that person. So I used to go on chat shows in Britain and in America, sort of being, who knows? And it was pretty sick-making, really. So I accept some of the vitriol that came my way.
But you now play all sorts of different characters. Is it a bit more freeing now? You can sort of be more confident in what you choose. You choose really interesting characters, I think, now.
Well, it's all I get offered. I've said this before. It's all I get offered is sort of freaks and weirdos and misshapen beasts, perverts.
Do you think that human beings are misshapen beasts and perverts?
Yes, very much so.
Yes.
I think that civilization is a very, very thin veneer.
Yes.
And I think we're terrifying.
But you were always a good actor, so did you always think that? Have you always had a very unique, a very astute perspective when it comes to human beings and the way that they behave? This is dark.
What?
I mean, you've always been able to kind of, to be a good actor, I think you need to be able to understand what people are like. And you've always been pretty good, I believe.
No, well, not really.
So
I got better. I got better. It's quite odd. I got better partly because actually, I think actors tend to be either character actors, playing something very unlike themselves, or playing someone rather like themselves, and brilliantly. Paul Newman, Robert Redford, the list goes on. And I got, because of maybe the way I looked or because of Four Weddings, I got offered lots and lots of leading man parts where, you're the hero, the girl falls in love with you, and all ends happily in the end. And actually, if I had any talent, it really wasn't for that. It was for being silly characters, doing silly voices, doing other people. And because I used to have this comedy show in the 80s, and that's what we did. We wrote and performed these shows doing mad characters. And so now I get to do that, and I think I'm less shit at that than I am at leading man.
I think you put yourself down. But didn't you used to write adverts as well?
Yeah.
One for Brill Cream, is that correct?
Brill Cream. Red Stripe Lager.
Wow.
Mighty White Sliced Bread, with all the goodness of brown but the great taste of white. We did lots. We won awards.
What's the key to a good advert, do you think?
Well, they were just radio ads, and we just made them very silly. They were, what did we do? Well, for Brill Cream, we did the whole thing like a 1950s, voiceover advertisement. And here we are in London's Soho district, where the young men have a real bounce to their hair. It was like that. Or with Red Stripe Lager, we did... my dog's a working dog, see, and that's why I give him Red Stripe Lager. It was all just spoofs and silly.
So in terms of your life now, you've got your acting career, but you've also got the campaigning side. Tell us a little bit about what it was like giving evidence at Leveson. What's that side of your life been like? Is it good to have the two things?
Well, yeah, oddly enough, I'm much more proud of that side of my life than I am of any of the showbiz side. And it was all happened by accident in 2011. Roughly speaking, I went to a dinner hosted by Alan Rusbridger, the editor of The Guardian, and it was for Nick Davis. Is Nick here? Yeah, there he is. Hello, Nick. And we were all talking about the worst abuses of the tabloid press and what they did to innocent people. It was nothing to do with celebrities. It was to do with people who'd had tragedies in their lives and things. And we were talking about that, and we were talking about the fact that they were really running the country. Successive governments going back to Thatcher had been sort of in their pocket, terrified of them. And there were all sorts of people there, Tom Watson, I can't remember, all like-minded. But the conclusion was, no one will ever care about this in the country unless there's some terrible, egregious abomination that moves the public. And then, oddly enough, within a year, that did happen with the Millie Dowler story. And suddenly the public was rightly horrified and scandalized. And at that point, a couple of academics, Brian Cathcart, who's over there, professor, and Martin Moore, another one, said, well, we've started this thing called Hacked Off. It's about phone hacking and other press abuse, and would you very kindly turn up to the green in front of Westminster Palace and say a few words to the media? And I did, and it all kicked off from there. And just grew and grew, and we got sort of wind behind us. We got a mad ex-Liberal MP called Evan Harris, sort of corralling us, pushing us backwards and forward, did a great job, took the Dowlers to Downing Street and demanded a public inquiry, and Cameron and the government didn't want to do it, but they had to because they made promises to the Dowlers, and it all happened, and it's been going on now for 10 years with backwards and forwards. I won't bore everyone here with all the backwards and forwards, but the people I've met, including you, over those 12 years, have been by far and away my favourite people I've met in my life, by far and away, and it's lovely to have a gang, a team, an esprit de corps, and it's been great.
Do you think things have changed?
Well, I was just discussing that the other night. I think they're not as bad as they were, but that could be to do with technology, for instance, like phone hacking is, we think now, much harder than it was when it was everywhere. Do the commercial newspapers still control government? Yes, absolutely they do.
Yes, absolutely they do.
Yeah.
They do. I mean, well, you only have to look at the number of meetings between Rishi Sunak and Rupert Murdoch.
Yeah.
And his executives.
What were those numbers? I tweeted them the other day. They were terrifying.
Terrifying. I don't know them.
Hundreds of meetings.
Brian might know, but I don't know. But
yeah.
What are they for, and why, and what?
Quite. And that famous quote of Rupert Murdoch's, who said, "The reason I'm against the EU is because when I talk to Brussels, they ignore me. When I go to Westminster, they do exactly what I tell them to do." And that seems to be the case. We know, people think, oh, we must be a bunch of leftists. Not at all. Tony Blair was one of the worst at this. And, he was calling Rupert Murdoch on the morning he agreed to join the Americans in invading Iraq and all that. It was terrifying.
So what about Prince Harry? Do you think that it's good that he's doing what he's doing and, taking on the press? Do you know him? Do you think?
I don't know him. I think he's brave. I think he's a very angry man, very angry. I think he believes that the press effectively murdered his mother. And I think it's a good argument that they did. They chased her everywhere. They were chasing her that night in Paris. If they hadn't been chasing her and, flashing cameras in the eyes of the driver, maybe she'd be alive. And he's furious. And so I think he is heroic to be doing what he's doing.
So it's quite interesting when you think, we were thinking, you were saying it needed something like Millie Dowler to happen, but, at the other end of the scale, here's this man, it had to be somebody rich enough.
Yeah, that's the problem with all the lawsuits against the papers. I didn't know any of this before I started suing them, and probably everyone in this room knows this, but there's certain regulations to try and keep the courts clear. They want people to settle cases before they get to court. So if you get offered a settlement, a sum of money by the baddies, and they call it a Part 36 or something like that, if you say no and go on to court, which is your right, and the judge, who's never seen how much was in the Part 36, he doesn't know, and you win, and the judge awards you damages, and they're even 1 penny less than what you were offered in your Part 36, you have to pay for both sides' costs, all the costs of the court case, from the moment you turn down that thing, which is many millions. So obviously no one can take that on. And maybe not even Harry, and that has been the problem, and Murdoch in particular has just said, pay, just keep paying them off. What's the number? How much has he actually paid by now? Anyone know? Some of my brethren know. You just made that up, huh? 1.2 billion. Yeah. Yeah, incredible. And basically to keep everything out of court, because in court there would be disclosure, and in disclosure, a lot of the big executives who perpetrated the very worst of the, for instance, Millie Dowler things, and who are still in office, this would be very damaging to them, and that's why he's determined to keep it out of court at all costs.
So is the answer you go into politics? Because we would like a Prime Minister who danced round.
I agree with you, and that would be my main calling card. It would be dance. I dreaded that scene more than any scene I've ever had to do in my life. I mean, any man in this room knows that, Englishman knows that dancing sober at 7 in the morning is like, I mean, just misery. And that's what it was. Okay, Hugh, camera's rolling, just freak out. Oh, it's a nightmare. Nightmare.
And when that song comes on now, is it trigger? Or?
It triggers my daughters.
Does it?
Yes. And they do the dance. Yeah. But if they don't, I don't feed them. Yeah.
Do they like your films in general? I believe they like Wonka.
They love Wonka. Well, they're only human.
That's good. But do you think it's possible to be a good politician anyway? I mean, I don't know
What?
if it is. You know,
Oh, I see. Yeah, I fantasize about it all the time. I would be marvelous. Yeah. My new party I want to start, the Rescue Party, in which you're not interested in a political career. In fact, you're not going to stand for re-election. It's going to be 5 years where you just go in and the only priority is to, with every single problem, is what's right for the country. Not what's right for my career, not what's right for my party, not what's right for, in terms of how will this go down with the Daily Mail, just what's right for the country. How could people not vote for that?
so if you have a question, if you put your hand up, and then John's going to just gather a couple of questions, and then we'll put them to Hugh.
I just was wondering if you thought after Rupert Murdoch things would be better under Lachlan.
Under?
Lachlan.
The son.
Oh. I never knew it was Lachlan. I thought it was Lachlan. That's an interesting... I don't know what my opinion is on that. What's my opinion on that, Evan? Nick? Nick, what's my opinion? Do we think Lachlan is any better than Rupert?
No, nothing much worse. That's a horrible sense of entitlement.
I'm sorry I couldn't answer, but you got the great Nick Davis, who broke the whole phone hacking scandal story in The Guardian, deserves a round of applause.
Right, can we have another round, please?
I do. I'm Melody Paddington.
Oh, hello. How nice.
I would love to know, what are you going to be up to the night of the general election?
Well, you see, what happened with the last election was that Mad Evan Harris made me do a tactical voting campaign. And you were into that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we went to 5 constituencies to try and persuade people to vote tactically, because we thought there was only one really important thing, which was to keep this bunch of nutters out. And it wasn't particularly, we were not party political. We even backed Dominic Grieve, ex-Tory, against the indentured Tory that he was up against. And we had a lot of fun and did incredibly badly. We lost every single constituency that we campaigned in.
We did.
And Evan wants to do the same thing again this time. I don't know if it's really necessary, if Labour are going to have a landslide, but he thinks it is. Well, you're still doing this, aren't you?
Absolutely, yeah, the work is still to be done.
Okay.
And I'm just going to celebrate, like, for 24 hours when I
Well, yeah. Who do you most look forward to losing their seat?
I think it's got to be Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Right.
In the same vein, as you're in a good mood, and you know people would support you, why not do a Zelensky?
Well,
You'd look good in green.
What?
You'd look good in the green combat.
I know. Quite tight khaki. And you know, he was Paddington. Yeah. So weird.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I can't possibly do it. I drive ridiculous cars. I'm not green. My children go to private school. I would be a laughingstock within 5 seconds. But I like the fantasy.
Thank you. Not quite as sophisticated as your other questions, but what would be your last meal on Earth?
Oh. Well, I'd want to look slim on the scaffold, I think. Yeah. So nothing too bloating. I don't really like any food anymore except curry. I would really have curry for breakfast, lunch, tea, and supper if I possibly could. Yeah.
Any drinks to go with it?
Yeah, I mean, a cobra, obviously.
Nothing from the Lazy Susan?
The Lazy Susan, yeah. Is it you who's obsessed with Lazy Susans? You've got a phobia about them?
No, Evan Harris is obsessed by it. He had a girlfriend who worked for a very upmarket House and Garden magazine as the decoration editor, and he said, which item could you not face having in your home? And she said, Lazy Susan. He's been obsessed by them ever since.
Okay, is that why it's there?
I think so.
Right, gentlemen, here you.
Hugh, Matt Bird. I'm like the last person I'm going to ask a non-political question.
Right.
In the hope to draw the room back together.
Yeah.
Please can you tell us about one of the first times you realised you could make people laugh?
I suppose I used to do imitations at school. I used to do imitations, and it got me into terrible trouble. Poor Mr. Hammond. Mr. Hammond came from Halifax. They used to say, "Who is the real Hugh Grant?" And anyway, I remember doing an imitation of him because he used to do this at the same time, and I used to slide under my desk, do the imitation. And the kids were laughing, and then I noticed Mr. Hammond's feet coming up to the side of the desk, and he'd seen the whole thing, and it was terrible. I had to run around the river. Yeah, it's a sad story, really.
Next question, please, anybody?
Hi, Hugh.
Hello.
I'm genuinely interested as a lowly television actress. How you come back from incidents where the where the media may have portrayed you in a bad light, perhaps the DV, how obviously you're here and you're amazing, you've done amazing things since. What is it that you've done? Do you take certain advice? Is there a certain mindset that you have to take? Or how do you come back from adversity when you feel like maybe people, the general public, think your career is not where you want it to be? Obviously things go up and down. I'm interested in how you come back from that and what process or advice you take.
Well, you see, the thing about my big scandal in 1995 was that Hollywood didn't mind. Hollywood only cares about whether you're making the money or not. And because the film I was in at that time made money, they still loved me. I was being offered big family films, virtually while I was being arrested. And so, Hollywood's just about money, and I think that still applies. And what I do think now is I see people getting their knickers in a terrible twist about Twitter storms or, social media storms. And I'm a great believer in the Queen, Mick Jagger and Kate Moss, who just never spoke, just never said anything. And the whole thing blows away, and then you're still cool. I think the worst thing you can do is try and do PR and make apologies and all that bullshit. Just write it out, I now think. Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Was it?
The campaigns that you were involved with, and Evan and other wonderful people. I'm a journalist, the better kind, I think. But one thing really strikes me is that this is the defense is of individuals, okay? People who've been wronged, individuals who've been wronged, either famous or, like in the case of Minnie Dowler and so on. But actually, at the moment, our press is going for the most powerless people who have no voice, like asylum seekers, particularly. And it seems to me that unless the campaign actually looks at those who can't speak and do anything, then in a way it's too small. In a way, it fails to address the biggest problems.
Well, you might be right. That's a bigger discussion that we should have with, the board and my friends and everything. You might be right. Certainly, I've always bent over backwards. I've twisted myself into knots to try and convince people, the media, whatever, that this isn't something about celebrities. I really don't give a damn about celebrities. I really don't. I mean, I can vaguely care about their families who are innocent, but the trials and tribulations of someone who gets a bit of bad press or even intrusion, it doesn't bother me too much. You sort of slightly put yourself up for that when you go into show business. So I've always tried to make this about the people from all kinds of walks of life, which are not show business, who've been appallingly treated, and who've had children killed in road accidents or murdered, or brothers killed in terrorist incidents and things, and then had been appallingly intruded upon with microphones hidden in bunches of flowers from the Sun or the Daily Mail, or the Daily Mail turning up to a funeral where a family was killed in Ireland, and just being there at the funeral and being there at the party, pretending to be a mourner, that kind of thing. That's I've always tried to make people understand that's what Hacked Off is really about. There are people within Hacked Off who are also very, very interested in, for instance, equality in terms of gender and all that kind of thing. People like me, that's not my priority, and but I can see there's a good case for it. So come to our board meeting and make the case. But I think I would just be nervous of ever going into an area where Hacked Off is just seen to be standard woke, and that would limit the people who might support us.
Woke is good.
Yeah, we might disagree about that, actually. I think woke has been an open goal for the right. I don't think we'd have had this terrible government without...
We don't surrender to them.
Yeah, well, but they won because of it. That's what I think. I think that they won the culture war, and that's why we had Boris and Co.
So, quick question from me. What, if in an ideal world, what would the next 5 years look like for you, from a film point of view, from a project point of view? What's next for you in an ideal world?
Well, not being dead would be good, huh?
Teenage children.
Yeah, fuck. My children are about to become teenage.
Sorry.
I don't know. I'm very lucky. I have a very strangely happy life. Suddenly, after 50 years of being a miserable, bitter bachelor, I have a very nice family. I have children I love, and although it's on a day-to-day level, absolute torture. I look at my iPhone, I look at the pictures, and I think this is amazing. I'm very happy, and so I want more of that. I don't know if I want to really act much more. I get so frightened now. My nerves are out of control. I make life miserable for everyone around me. I still, tragically, at the age of 63, fantasize that I will finish my novel. I'd like to do that.
Weren't you going to do a PhD in art history? Is
And
that still open?
when I was 23,
It could still be open.
yes, I could just turn up at the Courtauld and start.
And weren't you going to... Am I right in thinking you started a novel?
Yeah, I wrote half one, yes. Yeah, it's pretty good. It takes place entirely in the boot of a car.
We've got a publisher out here today. Is that a good idea for a story?
I think if it could pace up out of the boot, it might have more potential.
If it what?
Does it ever get out of the boot?
Yeah, it does.
How many chapters does it take?
Well, it's not like that. Our hero is in the boot.
Right.
And a lot of what his thoughts and reminiscences are about previous time. We flash back. Yeah, it's rather good.
We've got a question from a lady from the left chair.
I have to stay hopeful. So, what keeps you?
I have no hope at all. I see no ray of sunshine. Not at the moment. I do see one. I see one. This is my next campaign. Actually, is And it's one of the reasons why I'm unelectable, is because my first thing on my manifesto would be to pull the plug on the internet. I believe it's destroyed us. I remember life before the internet, and I was relatively happy. And then I've watched everyone become a sort of gibbering, lobotomized wreck, particularly young people. And I can't see one advantage. It leaves us open to cyber warfare from enemies. I don't see any plus to it. But I realize it's an odd opinion.
It's not that.
No, but what I do now, for instance, I take breaks and go on little breaks for 3 days with no phone, no internet, no nothing. And it's unbelievable. It's life-changing. Suddenly, you know, in the first hour, you're in a panic. You think, I've got to fix that, I've got to fix that, I've got to fix that. And then as the hours go by, you think, none of that was important. I'm really genuinely enjoying that pigeon on that roof over there. It's nice.
Well, you're like on the front. So, all your films or TV shows, which one do you look back on with the most fondness and would love to do again?
There's not many I can look squarely in the face without a bit of cringe, but I think Paddington was pretty good, and I think the Jeremy Thorpe thing was quite good.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you were amazing in that, and even to you when you were the Jeremy Thorpe character, you put. I mean, you make it sound as though you don't engage that much, but you put an awful lot of research into it, didn't you? And you even sort of lost a lot of weight. The way you wore his hat, everything.
Yeah, well, I was lucky enough to get salmonella in Sweden. I was poisoned by the local poisoner with some veal, and I lost a ton of weight, which was perfect because he was a sort of quite emaciated figure. But I think partly out of panic and nerves, which, as I say, have got worse over the years. I now do phenomenal amounts of research and work and microscopic, granular analysis of the character and his background, his family. I have maybe 100 pages of his history in minute detail from the day he was born and his parents, all invented out of my head. It's potentially all of it completely useless, but it makes me feel a little more secure on day one.
Lady on the second row.
You touched on AI and stuff earlier, but as a mother of small children, I'm scared of the future of press and social media and AI and the way the world's going and that. What steps are you taking, or how do you think, or how scared are you, or what are your thoughts?
Absolutely terrified. Are your children addicted?
No, mine are not there yet.
Oh, right.
I'm addicted, and my kids, I'm still keeping them away from tablets and things. My
Yeah.
oldest is 7, but I know that it's coming, and I'm
Yeah, it really is
terrified
coming.
how to deal with it and what I should do.
I don't know. It's one of the things that I'm completely panicked about it. And my wife and I, we're trying to set up little groups to make it cool for kids not to have a cell phone. Because at the moment they all want one because of peer pressure, but if no one had one, they wouldn't need one. So that's one thing. We're also furious with schools who proudly say, all our children have a tablet. Well, fucking hell, we're trying to get them off tablets the whole time at home. So don't give them a tablet.
My teachers have just issued a reading as a QR code.
It's disgusting.
Your wiki reading is presented as a QR code.
Yeah, and it's lazy too. I agree. Yeah, lazy. And I think they got into those habits over lockdown and can't go back.
You mentioned your kids a few times. I was wondering if any of them are emerging with any talent, and which one's your favourite?
That's Drunk Jan, by the way. She's
well done for getting the sentence out, John.
Yeah, a full sentence. Are they talented? Anna, are any of them talented? She's somewhere. No, I think we're agreed they're completely talentless. I don't really like any of them, really.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Two last. Here we go. Hugh, this is Rachel.
Hi, Hugh. I wanted to ask you about your hats-off views and always commendable what you've achieved for the group, and I'm straight to see the evolution of the Press Justice Project. You've spoken about a political career, and if you were to run for Prime Minister, what would your manifesto say about press reform?
About press reform? Yeah, that is good. Well, this answer has the potential to be unbelievably boring. There's always been two ways to solve the problem of the press having the power to abuse innocent people for profit, and the equal problem of the press really effectively running the country because they're blackmailing and terrorizing our elected politicians. And the two ways are, one, to strengthen regulation of the press, have actually a meaningful regulator, as we do of any industry in this country which has the power to harm people. They're all regulated. Gas, water, alcohol, whatever it is, there's a regulator. Plumbing. Medicine. And then, of course, broadcast journalism, heavily regulated because it came through later technology in the 1920s, and everyone thought, oh God, we've got a box in the corner of our room. It has the power to influence our opinions and distort our democracy, so let's have quite strict regulation. And so we had Ofcom and all that with, you know, the duty of impartiality and all these things which actually make our broadcast journalism the envy of the world. But the newspapers, meanwhile, were allowed to continue to regulate themselves and have, you know, demonstrated repeatedly over the last few decades that simply doesn't work. You can't be allowed to mark your own homework. You could if every journalist in this country, newspaper journalist, was a dedicated Nick Davis who was only after the truth and really cared about that, such as, for instance, most print journalists in the United States of America. They care about the truth almost to an insane degree, endlessly printing corrections and things. If you had that, you might not need anyone to step in and say, come on, you've got to have a proper regulator. But because so much of our press has been captured by big business, big oligarchical owners who care about their profit line most, and their political agenda and power second or equal, I think you do have to, I think unfortunately government does have to step in, not regulate the press themselves, that would be disgusting, but to come up with an arrangement such as Lord Leveson came up with after a year of this public inquiry, in which you have the press continue to form their own regulator, but there's a little body of decent people who just look at that regulator every year or so and say, is that really a regulator, or is this just you guys marking your own homework again? That's one route to making things better. The other route has always been through ownership. Is it crazy that our press, our print press, has been owned by an Australian American who's not British, and by the Barclay brothers who live on a tax-dodging Channel Island, or by Lord Rothermere, the Daily Mail, who is a non-dom? Do we really think that and is it right for them to have so much of the media? Is it all right? I mean, I know there's a lot of Australians here. You know, they have it much worse than us. Murdoch owns virtually all the fucking media in Australia. And should there be limits on what an owner can own in terms of the media in one given country? And do they need to be native? Should the owner of a British paper have to be British? I think yes. And that's always been the second route. It's complicated, but it's the second route to putting things together. Was that boring? Okay.
You've got a lady.
Yeah.
Hi, Hugh. I was just wondering, as an actor, how it feels to actually be famous, and if you use that being recognised as what you do for work, if you use that as a measurement for success.
I think that way madness lies, actually. I sometimes see, you know, I don't want to be the old fart going on about social media, but I see people being obsessed with, I must get more followers, must get more attention, more eyeballs on me. I don't think that's a recipe for a long career or happiness or satisfaction. I think I do sound a bit pompous, but I think in my experience, anything I've ever done that was either for money or because I thought, oh yes, this will be a big popular thing, it comes back to bite you. You've got to do only the things that you quite like and respect. Otherwise, you do suffer. And that's why, you know, I personally think that people who do, for instance, act in films, I feel sad when they go and do ads. I think don't do that because you're cashing in on eyeballs and celebrity, and I just think it's a bit cooler not to. That's what I think.
So Paddington was fantastic, hilarious. Wonka, brilliant. Are these the characters that you're sort of going for? Is that you talk a lot about your anxiety, the research you do, and you quite enjoy something like that? You're having a bit of fun with it, and why not?
Well, both. They are more fun, but oddly enough, I mean, it's crazy, but I promise you I had quite a long backstory for the Oompa Loompa.
Can we hear the story, please?
Well, he was not a very happy little man. He's not very popular in Loompa Land. You know, he wanted to be popular. He was I had him down as an archivist. He's a sort of historian of the island. And he was that guy that knows everything. Like the guy at the golf club who knows all the rules. And I think they slightly hated him, and that's why they gave him the job of looking after the cocoa beans. And, you know, then he fucked it up. And I think it's very sad for him, the idea at the end of that film that he has to go back to Loompa Land, because they don't really love him. Heartbreaking. It's an amazing performance, really.
It is. It truly is.
Can I mention you ask 2 questions, please?
Yeah.
So the first one is, I've been a victim of breast abuse myself. So one of the things that sort of bothered me was that journalists are very protected, and if you worked in childcare, for instance, and you abused a child, first of all, somebody would sue that nursery provider. But second of all, that individual that abused the child would be held accountable. That doesn't tend to happen with breast abuse. And obviously, I just wondered if you think it would be a good idea that people, individuals, are held accountable just like individuals are victims of breast abuse on either end of it.
Yeah, I think that's right. And like I said earlier, it is the only industry left in this country which has the power to. It's a massively powerful industry, which it should be. Free press, absolutely essential. But it also has the power in the wrong hands to really harm people. And for that reason, you have to have regulation. And we don't have any kind of effective regulation of newspapers in this country. So I do think you need that. Whether you come after the publication or the individual, I think if you go after the public, if you had an effective regulator and they admonished and fined the paper, I'm not sure that journalist would last very long. You know, if they kept repeating that, they're going to get fired. So I think you kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
The other question was, with regard to Excel, as an example.
Yeah.
So for example, when my case, I went to Excel before I was in the movie, and when it went to right, we're going to have a meeting now, and we're going to have all the editors on the newspapers come into this meeting, and they make a decision on your case. But don't worry, the real on Sunday is going to step outside. Even though that guy steps outside, let's face it, they're probably all kind of pally. Would it not make sense to put some completely independent people, maybe the victims of breast abuse, on that same board in equal numbers to help make that decision, to make the decision final?
Yes, and that's obviously the way to do it. And that's what an independent regulator would look like. But, and that's what was recommended by Leveson. And that's what his recommendations were voted into law by both houses of Parliament back in 2013. Big champagne night for Hacked Off. And, you know, a lot of beer was drunk. And what we didn't realize is that the government had cunningly spotted a tiny little loophole, a technicality, which they used over subsequent months and years to wriggle out of the whole thing. There's a little thing called commencement to any bill that's passed in Parliament. The Secretary of State has to at some point say, and now we commence. And they just never did it. They never did it. And that's why we're still fighting, because we were basically, or the country was betrayed. Our elected representatives voted for this thing that would bring about meaningful regulation. And government, owned by and terrified of big non-British, non-tax-paying media moguls, are chickened out.
Was there a particular actor or performer that inspired you when you were younger? Or was it a family member or anyone in particular that you could say led you into the pathway?
Well, no, I mean, I've said this before, I really did get into it slightly by mistake. I was going off to do this other degree. I was going to be an eternal student, frankly. And that summer, as I was preparing to go to the Courtauld Institute and do an MPhil in History of Art, I got a call to say that there was a screening of this incredibly pretentious little student film I'd acted in while I was at Oxford. And it was at BAFTA, and I got on my bike and I biked there in my dinner jacket and watched the film, and it was cringeworthy. But there was a great fashion at that time, this was 1981, for posh boys. It was the time of Brideshead Revisited and Chariots of Fire and things like that. And people said, agents came up to me afterwards and said, "Baby, we can make you a star." And I said, no, it's fine, thanks, I'm off to do this MPhil. And then I went and thought about it for a couple of days and thought, well, maybe if I do it for a year, because I need some money. I have absolutely no money. So I rang the agent back and I said, okay, I'll do it for a year. And here I am, 40-something years later. But I don't want to sound ungrateful, because I've been given a wonderful space to share narratives.
Right, last question, we'll finish with, I think somebody have you, Sky? Two questions. Two questions. The first thing is, no, not the other.
Where is he? I don't want to talk to Sky.
One question, Sky, one question.
Two questions. The first thing is that you actually, I'm not sure this, you hate Hollywood, you don't like angels. What the hell are you doing in show business?
You're an agent, Sky. And I do hate you. Sky, for people who don't know him, he's a football agent, or so he says he is. And,
former table tennis champion.
Is that right? And a terrible, uncontrollable perv.
and a former, and still an uncontrollable perv, yeah.
But a very staunch and important hacked-off supporter. What was your question? I don't know. I don't really like showbiz very much.
Showbiz. Do you remember when we was in Ascot and these two women said to him, could you take a picture of us? And they gave him the camera and he took a picture. One of them went, "Anything else? You can't." He just walked off. There's no showbiz man whatsoever, and you're not even commercial. You're not actors. You're in London. They're just really hungry, and you just don't seem to be bothered about money. I mean,
No, but that is an act. I do love it.
tell everyone a two and a half men story. That's phenomenal.
No, I'm not telling that story.
Right, secondly, what's your favourite sport? Football, tennis, golf, what F1?
I play a lot of tennis, but it gives me absolutely no happiness at all. I'm so angry from the moment I put my little white shorts on. I'm fucking furious until the moment I get home. So I don't know why I do it. My wife's a very good tennis player. She got me into it. She can play. But I mean, when we play together, it's awful. So I don't know. We like F1. We go because we thirst for glamour. It's not very green.
Thank you, Simon. And do you want to, I don't know whether you want to ask a couple of quick fire questions based on Hugh's takes on to whatever I have in the album?
Give Dan a question. Dan had his hand
Dan
up.
has a question here.
Yeah.
Dan Evans.
I just want to make the point that independent journalist is working in some quite dangerous journalistic space. When somebody comes after you personally, it's really scary. And we've all kind of experienced this. And what it reflects on is the fact that there should be a regulatory body within this industry which protects journalists as well as the industry.
But that was part of Levison's recommendations.
Exactly. And the failure to adopt has exposed and left open journalists who are independent, for example, who are trying to investigate.
Yeah.
With the threat of ruin, like moving cars every time.
Yeah.
Simply really because of this sort of recalcitrant approach to joining a regulated regulator, effectively. So, just a little quick one to say that it manifests negatively on all sides of the equation, that particular thing.
No, I agree. And people who are interested, that's what the government just right now have repealed, is a part of the Levison Architecture called Section 42, which was a clever thing, which was an encouragement for newspapers to join a proper regulator. And one of the encouragements was that if a good journalist like Dan or like Nick got sued by a massive Deripaska, for instance, to silence them because they were exposing something damaging about them, which was very much in the public interest. The Section 42 said that if you were inside a recognized regulator, if your paper had joined it, you would have the ability to settle this matter not in vastly expensive courts of law, which are so ruinous to small publications like the one Dan works for. It's not so small, and it was quite big, or The Guardian that Nick works for. Instead of a ruinous time in court, which would make you just back off and spike the story, forget it, it could be settled in a arbitration. One guy in a room in a very cheap 2-hour sort of ritual, and so that's why it's particularly sad that Section 42 has just been repealed by the government. But I should say, just in case anyone's interested, Dan is one of the great heroes of this campaign. He was a tabloid journalist, quite a spectacular one, who just like several people in this room, like Emma and Graham, who organised tonight, just decided life was better on the other side of this argument and have come over to our side, and their life is not that easy anymore because such is the omerta amongst commercial press, particularly the tabloid press. They can't work for those guys anymore. They won't have them. And what they've done is really heroic, and Pat Top's very grateful to them.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Hugh. I think it's brilliant to talk about these things, and it's so good that everybody's so interested as well. I think we've covered lots of different things. I mean, I used to be, I think you've kind of overplayed my part. I'm basically a pop music journalist. So I'm going to end with one question, and that is a smash hits question, because we used to have this thing called the biscuit tin. Yeah. Thank you. So I just want to know, did you snog Madonna?
I'm so tempted to tell that whole story. I don't know. Mucky McMullen's here, who also actually has done a lot of good work for us, but I am still frightened of you. No, of course not. I respected her. I respected her space.
Should be pleased if you said you did, to be quite frank. But no, love Madonna, love you, and thank you so much for tonight, and thank you everybody for coming. I think we've got drinks now, is that correct?
Yeah, more drinks.
Yeah, more drinks, and Dan's just... Dan, who is is going to give the correct information.
First of all, thank you to Hugh, and thank you to Emma for
also to thank John Shepherd, that's still secure.
Very much so. Thank you, John.
Graham Johnson. And yeah, thank you very much to Anna and